How's that? Get a ladder. Okay, folks. Had to get this on my level. So, very pleased to have this gentleman here, a giant among giants. Because he's tall. See, he's tall. Yeah, so this is Greg Koch, and I became aware of him several years ago, initially on the internet, then we started chatting online, and I did a podcast with him, and then Calum and I saw him down in South Carolina a couple years ago. We played in Gainesville.
That's right.
Remember that?
Yep.
A couple years ago now or so, too. And then I went and saw him play in Kansas City with his trio with some friends and my sister and brother-in-law. They're coming tonight.
Excellent.
They became converts because they saw Greg and his trio. So Greg's an incredible player on electric and acoustic. He's got the Jerry Reed style. He's got blues and funk and everything. And I just wanted him to come and talk about what he does and take some Q&A, and I can hand it off to him now, Mr. Greg Koch.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Andy. Well, it's fun to be here, doggone it. Initially, I was going to do it on the old acoustic, which was going to be kind of fun, but then Andy's like, why don't you bring the band down? And I said, well, should I bring the acoustic? Bring the electric. I was like, okay. So I'm going to show you some stuff, and usually when I do these things, I never prepare anymore. It's been like 30 years of doing these things, so I just kind of put the finger out in the wind and see what's happening. So I usually kind of always ask at the beginning if there's any things that particularly that you wanted me to talk about. I would be glad to go into any of that stuff. But typically what people ask me is like, show me that chicken picking thing, and how do you do, what kind of weird chords are you playing when you do a blues, and yada, yada, yada. So I'll do all of these things, and I'm heavily caffeinated right now. So once we begin, it'll come fast and furious. And as I always like to tell people, at any kind of clinic type of thing, if you come away with one thing that you end up using, you will have gotten your money's worth. And I'm fixing to show you about 1,000. So if one of those things sticks, we're all good. Does that sound good? Any questions to start off with, first and foremost? And don't worry if you don't, I can take it from here. It's not a big deal. But anything burning in anyone's cranium as we speak that you just absolutely wanted me to start off on?
How tall are you?
How tall? Oh, here we go. All right. I see what we're doing. I'm 6'7". And my son's the same height. Everyone knows, your son looks taller. It's like, that's because he's got hair. I usually start off with a little blues with a little weird intro thing. And sometimes I like to have a little kind of quasi Leslie type of effect on my guitar. I don't always do it, because I have an organ in the band with Toby. Thank you very much indeed. I remember when I first came up with it, my son Dylan was playing drums, and I think we were in the basement of the old house, and I go, what should we call this one? He just looked up and he goes, call it Dirty Old B. So that's what we called it for the longest time until a buddy of mine wrote some lyrics for it, and then actually my buddy Paul Barrera from Little Feat sang on it, and then it was called Night Owl Now, so it has two different incarnations. But anyways, it's basically just a blues. See, years ago, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, I finally was in the mindset of, I came to a crossroads where I was like, I'm a guitar player that needs to play with a band. I remember there was this snippet with Eric Clapton in 1968, you know, when he was an undisputed savage of biblical proportions. And he's sitting there with that multicolored SG, and he's showing his vibrato, and he's in front of the Marshalls, and he's got the hair, and he described himself as a guitar player of lead accompaniment. That's what he did. And I thought, you know, I got to play with a band or else I'm kind of SOL. Now, there was a few things that I had over the years that would sound decent all by myself, but at that particular point in time, I made it an effort to learn, to have an arsenal of stuff where I could sit and at least play by myself and have it sound somewhat all-inclusive. And I was always kind of a blues guy. That was, you know, the thing that kind of inspired me the most over the years, kind of consistently. So I first came up with the idea. I remember we were doing a thing with my trio out in, I think we were doing a thing at a Guitar Center in Hollywood, and I was doing a lot of Fender stuff at the time. I'd do clinics for them. I'd come in with a band, and we'd just play, and people would ask about what I was using, and so on and so forth. And in the other room, Doyle Dykes was playing. So he'd come and watch us as we were doing our set, and then I'd go and watch him. And I was like, he opened up with like a shuffle tune, and just all by himself, and I thought, damn, you know, he was playing kind of a little lead by himself and kind of accompanying, you know, doing multiple parts at the same time. And I thought, man, he's sitting by himself and is able to make all this music by himself. So I started to become fascinated with adding more things to my arsenal that was just a solo piece that would sound halfway decent. And this was one of the tunes. Now, basically the idea of just doing a shuffle, of course, I had various different iterations of shuffle that I would do. But like when Robert Johnson would do a shuffle, he would kind of make it sound like there were two parts going at the same time. You know, we'd have the... part, but I had to. So let me just kind of break it down a little bit. So that little, so basically two parts. There's that part going on, and then there's just a, so you want the one part to be more, to ring out more, and the other part's more muted. With all this different stuff, I just started learning various different morsels to kind of fill in the space. Like when I go to the 4, something like that. So you can do all this. Any of that stuff works, and then back to the 1. And the walk up to the 4 is just this little shell voicing. I do this thing all the time, and I use it in a bunch of different environments. You know, if I'm doing like a more of a, but I'm doing a funk thing, I'll be like, but if I'm doing a shuffle thing, it's like, and it's basically just doing like an E, I'm just doing it on the E string, D string, and G string. So it's like a E7, and then, I'm looking at it as a D over F sharp. And then this is like a diminish. And then I'll keep my first finger where it's at and bring those two fingers up a half step and get that. licks I go there, I can either do this thing where I go like a D over A, back to the E. Now, a cool thing with the blues is that you can always do a quick 1-5-1 before actually going to the 5. So that's E7, and then I'm starting at the top of that shell voicing ascension. I'm going to go down, and that's a B7 with the F sharp and the bass. Now, one thing Jimmy Reed would do, and Keith Richards actually talked about this in his autobiography about how we could never quite figure it out because it's wrong, but it's wrong but right. So when he goes to the 5 chord, so he's playing over the 5, but it's like a B over A. But I guess the modus operandi is that any open string is better than no open string as far as ringing out and sounding more girthsome as far as the arrangement. Best thing about playing solo stuff is that I love to paint myself into a corner and have to get out. So a lot of times you'll just start playing something like, oh, here we go. And then you just have to get your way out of it by just kind of improvise. Anyway, so there's all this stuff in the quiver that just kind of comes out at random. And I get stuff from weird places. Like this little thing I heard actually not too long ago. I always kind of stayed away from listening to too much the later Jeff Beck stuff because he was such an influence on me earlier on. I thought, if I listen to that stuff, it's going to permeate through my playing and then it'd just be like another mutant trying to sound like Jeff Beck. But every time he would do little wise ass things. He was the king of the wise asses, and he would come up with little snippets, and I'd be like, "Ooh, I'm taking that." And he did this cool little turnaround where he did this variation of, and I thought, "I'm taking that, Jeff Beck." And basically, it's in the key of E, and it's all on the E string, and you can do it as a turnaround E. Just kind of cool. That's your one thing, so take that. Anyway, now this turnaround I keep on doing of mine that I just like to do. So there's, I call it the I'm So Glad turnaround because Cream's version of I'm So Glad back in the day. But you can do this thing where you just take kind of like an E7. Okay, you can go up with it, you can go down. If I go down, I'm starting up here on the 4th fret on the G string, 5th fret on the A string. And I'm hitting that as a double stop. So I'm using my pick on my finger. You can use it just with your thumb and finger. And it's a triplet lick. So you hit that double stop, then you hit the high E string, and then the low E string. Then you go down a half step and do the double stop, then high string, low E string. hammer on. Wiseassery. You can also go up with it. Or you can add this little snippet, which is my little secret handshake way of doing it. I'm going to hit hitting that major seventh there on the B string at the 4th fret. And then I'm going to hit the sharp 9 on the high E string there at the 3rd fret. And then the major 3rd. Another one I like to do, the dirty old B has this turnaround that goes, the low E string or the low part goes, and the top goes, I gotta remember. You know how when you deconstruct stuff, you can't redo it, right? So it's like, turnaround I use for all kinds of different stuff. So if I'm up in E, I got an E7. I'm going to bring everything else down a half step except for my first finger. And that's a G diminish. Get this little hammer on. Half step down and do a F sharp half diminish. And I like to do this little, and then to E. So you go, kind of a nice little C9 to a B sus, back to the 1. That's a secret chord. I don't even know what it is, but I do it sometimes, and people start shrieking in terror. What do we got there? We got a 13. It's a savage chord, but I also like the end of that James Bond chord. That's a good one too. Major, minor. Do down here. Tell you can do a little tone control wah. Another one's like, do that one, and people, is our train coming? And that cool little lick is just, if I'm up here in E, I got the E, I got the flat 5, I got the 6, and I've got the root. And if I pre-bend that a half step, get this nice little, I can either do a volume swell with it, or I can grab the tone control and do a wah. Off to the races you go. Anyway, I don't know how we got there, but I like it. Yes?
So you're mostly doing, is it picking fingers?
It's a combination of different stuff. So I like the sound of just the fingers for certain things, and I'll pop my pick in between my first and middle fingers. And then when I'm doing other stuff, I'll use the pick and fingers together. And that's always, for years I would kind of go back and forth. But when I started getting into the Chet stuff and trying to figure out how I had to use my fingers for that, with the pick. all that pick and finger stuff, that came later on. And when I first started learning the Chet stuff, it seemed to me that all the people that could do that fingerstyle, Chet, Jerry Reed, Merle Travis stuff, it always ran in the family. You know, it was like an Uncle Bob taught me how to play that, or so, my older brother. And I had one uncle, his name was John, he worked in a bank, he didn't show me a damn thing, okay? He did nothing. None of my family played music except for my mom, she played piano. And I remember when I went to college, my buddy Carl, I'm still buddies with today, his uncle, who was only a couple years older than he was, kind of a northern Wisconsin situation. Anyway, and Rob, the older uncle, was getting his master's in music education, but he could do like saw, you know, he'd play the saw. You ever see that? He could do that, and he could play mandolin, he could play tenor banjo up a storm, but I would say, do that Merle Travis thing, and he'd get into his guitar case and he'd grab a little Sucrets container, and he had a thumb pick, and he'd get it out, and he would do like, you know, kind of stuff, and I would just be like, oh my God, how do you do that? It just seemed untenable to me. So at first I could kind of do like my introduction to that style was just being able to play the Mystery Train riff. Just to keep that going was a big deal. This going is the thing that people miss, because if I do it real slow, it's like, so over here I'm going, I'll turn this delay off here for a minute so it doesn't. That's what's going on with my right hand. So it's like all three are going. What I mean by that is the pick, middle finger, and third finger. My palm to mute the lower string. Down here I'm just going. Takes forever to get it down. I heard someone do this and I had to do it. They were doing something a little bit more percussive, like a, come on. There we go. So that on the right hand. Ignoring the A string completely, it just gets left out in the cold. So a bunch of that different malarkey, it's all, I have no friends. I have no, I've got no hobbies. I mean, people are like, oh, you do fishing? No, I play guitar and I reproduce. That's basically what's happened in my life. I got 4 kids. I got to deal with their activities. Got to keep the wife happy. And I basically, play. I practice. That's kind of my thing. And a lot of times I just sit around and I just play. And I'll come up with different snippets. Yes, sir?
So, since you said that you were first introduced to this with a thumb pick, do you ever use a thumb pick at all?
That's an excellent question. And I've attempted to use a thumb pick, and it just seems unnatural. That you can, again, just be content with who you're able to follow. It's getting a little weirder now with the algorithms are becoming a little more gatekeepery. But it was wild when I did the Rick Beato thing. That was another thing I will say. So I had this record coming out, and I'm sorry, do you want me to play more? Or are you like okay with these stories? Okay. So Rick Beato had done a little thing during COVID. He was like, oh, my 10 favorite Instagram guitar players. And he had me as one of them. I was like, oh, cool. This guy knows who I am. That's awesome. So then I ended up having him on my podcast, and that was that. So years go by, and his trajectory just goes insane. It was already insane at that point, but then it just went way, way, way up. And I started to do some stuff with my buddy Devin Ullman, who's Greg Ullman's son, and him and Dwayne Betts, who's Dickie Betts' kid, have this really cool legacy torch-bearing thing called the Ullman Betts Band. And they do this thing every fall where they go out and have special guests. And I started doing that and started to know those guys. And Devin's like, hey, maybe I can use some of my connections and so on and so forth to kind of help your career along a little bit. And so we decided that the first record we were going to put out was a compilation blues record with some new tracks, but kind of also. Anyway, so as we were thinking about what to do to promote the record, I said, Devin, I just got to go on Rick Beato's show. And he's like, who's Rick Beato? I'm like, dude. And then I told him, and then he got it. But it's again, the music business is so weird how people can be, know all about this situation over here, which is great, and be completely oblivious to this situation over here. Anyway, so I said, listen, I'm going to see if I can get on Rick Beato. And he's like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. So I email Rick, and I say, hey, Rick, long time no see. I have absolutely no idea if this makes any sense for you, but, I've got this new record out, and if there's any way in any capacity it makes sense for me to be on your channel, let me know. He gets back to me, like, the next day saying, it's so weird that you would email me, because I was just talking about you last night about how much I'd love to have you on my show. I'm like, awesome. Turns out we have the same accountant. Rest assured, his return is more complex than my own, but we have the same rock and roll accountant. Anyway, so he's like, you got to come to Atlanta. So it's whenever you're going to be down in Atlanta. So it was December. It was early December, and I had the rest of the month off. And I said, I'm actually available this month. So he got back to me like a day later and said, well, how's December 18th? I said, no problem. So I paid my own way down there, got a rental car, paid for the hotel, did the whole 9 yards. We went in there, and it took like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And I just played straight through. There weren't multiple takes. But when we got done, he's like, you have no idea how many of these internet guitar players come in here and can't play their own stuff. I go, what? He's like, oh yeah, some of them even take the audio home and doctor it up at home before they give it back, and I could post it. I was like, that seems so bizarre to me, but okay. And he was cool in the gang. It was all well and good. It was fascinating because they had released a video just prior to us going live in it wasn't live, but before we started taping the thing, they released a video. And as soon as we got done, Rick's like, how's that video doing? To his young assistant. And his assistant goes, well, and they pull up the algorithms or whatever they're looking at. They're like, oh, it's not doing what it should do. And I'm like, interesting. He goes, let's change the picture. Let's change the thumbnail. So they change the thumbnail to a different picture. A few minutes go by, and they can tell by watching it what it's supposed to do. Let's change the name again. So they change the name. I'm like, wow, this is a trip. And he's like, let's take you out. Let's get some lunch. So we're driving to get some lunch. He's like, where do you want to eat? And out of the corner of my eye, I see Waffle House. And I'm from the north, okay? So when I see Waffle House, we're going. I said, Rick, what about Waffle House? He's like, absolutely. So we go there, we order some food. The whole time he's on his phone. He's like, it's not. He goes, here's the deal. He goes, I have 5 million followers, but if this video doesn't perform X amount by such and such a time, the algorithm squishes it. So we constantly massage the thumbnail so that it's more clickbaity. So next thing you know, he's on the phone with his assistant going, we need to go negative. So they came up with a more kind of incendiary title to be clickbaity. And I'm astounded by this. And then we get back to his place, and he's like, we got to do a different picture. So he's out in his backyard on the picnic table, like, doing one of these, and they clip the picture, and they pop it in. And as he's driving me to the hotel, I said, at what point do you just say, we're good? You know, it's going to do what it's going to do. He's like, well, I'll be at this for hours. He goes, the good thing is that I'll do the same thing for your video. I'm like, but anywho, so by the next morning I looked at it, there was already like another title. So I don't know how many times he changed it. But he's like, I work like 80 hours a week doing this. And to me it was crazy. But anyways, the moral of the story is the video came out, and I'll never forget it. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and I happened to be doing this gig with these buddies of mine. And my accountant, our mutual accountant, called. He goes, hey, I'm here with Rick, your video's blowing up. I was like, what? He's like, it just debuted. And I look on my phone, and it's just PayPal after PayPal buy of people going and buying stuff, buying the blues record. And it was insane. For like 3 weeks, it was like nonstop. And then it was like #1 on the iTunes blues chart, #1, insane. And what was interesting is that everything else I did, the more traditional thing, oh, here's a nice write-up in vintage guitar. Everyone loves vintage guitar. Nice write-up of a write-up of me, a write-up of the guitar, one of my new guitars, a write-up of the record. The thing goes live, nothing. I mean, it's hard to say how many people bought it, or just streamed it or whatever the case may be. But compared to Beato, it was the right demographic at the right time. The people bought stuff like it was going out of style. So, yeah, the internet's weird, but man, when it hits, it hits. And so that's been great. Now our live shows, I can't tell how many times we're playing live and people come in. It's like, I had no idea who you were until I saw you on Rick Beato. I'm like, okay, whatever it takes. So that was huge. So the internet is, and it's just so weird having done all these different things. I mean, I put out these Stevie Ray Vaughan DVDs years ago, which sold a ton. And I forgot all about them years ago, and then, my Ariel Posen does a video. It's like, oh, I learned from those. And my buddy Nathaniel Murphy, who does all this stuff at Chicago Music Exchange, like, oh, I had those. I was watching those in my kitchen in Manchester, England. Like, what? So there's people that know me from whatever angle they get here. At this point, I just don't care. As long as they come. If they think I'm funny and can't play, cool. If they think I'm play and I'm a pain in the ass, cool. Whatever it takes, if they come, they come. So let the good times roll. That's your music business lesson. Questions? Don't be afraid. Yes?
Back to music.
Yes.
About writing music. So you said you have a lot of ideas, but then how did you develop them or structure them to kind of finish them? What do you say? Okay.
How did I put them all together? Well, I was never afraid. Well, a few different things. If I'm figuring out a piece of music, especially like if somebody else's song, there'll be elements to it that I really like, but I'm not really interested in knowing it absolutely note for note. It depends. If it's an arrangement like that Chet stuff, that's a little bit more through composed, but I will add my own syncopations and stuff and weird little substitutions and whatnot. But I guess the biggest thing is that I wasn't afraid to cherry pick the stuff I thought was cool from other people's music and then apply it in situations where you wouldn't normally think it would make sense. So I might learn something from a funk player and completely change it and use it in a different place. I might, find something that was I originally got from Chet Atkins and use it in a blues thing, whatever the case may be. So to me, music is music. So I always just had an ear for things that I thought were quirky and cool in someone's style or playing. And then in trying to figure it out, sometimes I figured it out incorrectly, but I kind of liked what I came up with better than what I was going for and thought, well, I'm not going to take the time to get it exactly right because I kind of like what I'm doing like this better. So it automatically became kind of a different thing. It's kind of funny. I just saw an old interview with J.J. Cale where he was talking about that. He's like, well, everyone's like, well, how did you get your own style? He's like, I sat down and tried to play along with records and could never get it right and just did my version of what I thought they were doing. And there's nothing wrong with that, as opposed to just having, inserting all the different snippets that you learn verbatim from different people. Not that there's anything wrong with that either, but if you want to do your own thing. So that's kind of what I did. I got things from various different people, and like little, if I just take like that Freddie King ninth chord up here, At one point I was like, well, you can do like funk, so. And there I'm just kind of going, making it a sus chord, and then going down to a minor third, and then resolving. Or shuffle-wise, it's great. You can go. And sometimes I'll take that and get kind of outside with it and say, any idea that I have, any chord shape, any lead thing, I can bring it up and down minor thirds and add this tension as making it kind of a diminished idea. So just little things like that. Or I'll take this little chord, which I thought was cool, where I heard somewhere. And I thought, well, what if we did? Again, with the minor thirds. I can also just use it as a blues scale. Take a chord and go up and down diminished scales by just going half step, whole step. And then I'll get chords from different places too, like I heard Alan Holdsworth do this chord. So that's my favorite go-to, minor 11th chord if I'm doing any kind of like. We'll do these. I can add those to a different scenario. So if I'm doing like a. Sudden Alan Holdsworth's getting all funkified, you know what I'm saying? So all of those different things, and then I got this thing from Robin Ford where he actually got it from when he was playing in Miles Davis's band. He would hear, they'd be vamping over like one chord. You hear the keyboard player going. So what he's basically doing is he takes a minor pentatonic scale, and for each tone of the pentatonic scale, you get two chords. So if I'm doing it in A, I'm gonna start up here at the A here on the. Basically, I'm thinking of the B string following the pentatonic, the A minor pentatonic on the B string. So the top note is on B string, and I'm going to start with the A up here. So I'm going to do an F triad, and then I'm going to go down a half step and do like a E with a raised fourth. So each note of the pentatonic scale gets two chords. Then I go down to the down here. So if I'm doing like a chord, I took that from a Steely Dan record. And it's just kind of a cool sus chord. I don't know, when Steely Dan did their comeback record in the 90s, whoever the guitar player was there. I thought, I'll be stealing that immediately. So I'm just barring there at the 5th fret, and I got the A string up there at the 9th fret. And then I got the 11th there, so I got the D string, or so the D note on the G string at the 7th fret, and so if you're vamping like on an A minor, you do these little rigs. How we doing on time? We good? All right. Any last question? Any last question? Yes.
So that Steely Dan chord, were you barring with your index finger?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, to get that.
Right. That's it. That's it. The one thing. All right, folks, thank you very much. We'll see you tonight for the rock show. Down here, and then I think Greg got the other one, she was pinky, and I'm using my thumb. And then I figured I could actually hit pitches essentially.